This is The Long Road to Publishing, the podcast where we hear from authors who have traveled a long and bumpy road to publishing their books. Whether you're just starting out on your own writing and publishing journey, or if you're all too aware of the many possible detours along the way, this podcast is for you. I'm your host, Eva Langston, author, writing instructor, and creator of Eva's newsletter for writers on Substack. Thank you so much for coming along on the ride. I am absolutely delighted to share today's episode featuring author Kate Broad. Kate's publishing journey is bananas. She's written everything from middle grade sci-fi to steamy romance to dark, propulsive, and complex literary novels. In fact, her debut novel, Greenwich, is one of those dark and propulsive and complex literary novels, and it is hands down one of my favorite reads of the year. You'll hear me gush to Kate about how much I loved it in just a second. So yeah, Kate's publishing journey is wild. We need to get right into it. Just a quick reminder to rate and review and subscribe to the podcast or share about The Long Road on social media. There are so many podcasts out there, so every little mention of this one helps it stand out from the crowd. Thanks so much for listening, and now on with the show, which I'm calling From Indie Romance to a Big Five Debut. Kate Broad holds a BA from Wellesley College and a PhD in English from the CUNY Graduate Center. She is a Bronx Council on the Arts Award winner for fiction, and her writing has appeared in The Rumpus, No Tokens, Electric Literature, LitHub, and elsewhere. Her debut novel, Greenwich, was released in July 2025 from St. Martin's Press and was named one of People Magazine's Best New Books, a Vanity Fair Summer Read, and an Amazon Editor's Pick for Best New Literature and Fiction. Originally from Massachusetts, she lives in the Bronx. Welcome, Kate, to The Long Road to Publishing.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
I am so excited to talk to you. I have a little hint of what your publishing journey entails, but I'm sure it's going to entail so many more things. And I did want to just, before we get into the whole journey, say that I am currently reading Greenwich. I stayed up way too late last night reading it, and I haven't quite finished, but I already can tell it's going to be on my top favorite reads of the year.
Thank you.
I feel funny saying it's a literary page turner because I feel like all books should be page turners, but it is like one of these beautifully written prose, kind of this gauzy memory coming of age, looking back sort of literary novel, but it's so propulsive and suspenseful. And part of the reason I had to stay up reading is because the foreshadowing, I knew we were watching a slow moving train wreck, and I couldn't look away.
That's exactly how I wanted readers to experience. And that's exactly how I describe it too, where I'm like, it's a literary page turner. Like there's a little bit of a mystery, there's a little bit of a thriller, there's some suspense, but it's kind of this whole genre mashup where it's still a literary novel and it's a character driven novel, but also I wanted it to be that thing where you're turning the pages and you're just watching this slow motion train wreck unfold.
Yes, definitely.
It's a tense book. And so for people who kind of want that experience, also a coming of age novel. I love genres. I mean, I think that's something that's going to come up a lot in this conversation because I've written in a lot of different genres, and I think that comes through here. And what I wanted to do, and what I think literary fiction gives the freedom to do, is to say, I'm going to take from all of these different elements and all these different types of storytelling. And if you can make it work, then you just make it work.
Yeah. Well, and not to mention there's some very, deep themes, very thematically rich as well in that book. Well, so we've been talking about it very generally. Do you want to give just a little elevator pitch of what Greenwich is about?
What is this propulsive coming of age literary mashup? It's about a woman who's looking back on the summer that she was 17, that she spent staying with her very, very wealthy aunt and uncle in Greenwich, Connecticut. And while she's there, an accident happens, and she's really the only one who knows if not all of what happened, then kind of more about what happens. And so she's put in this position of trying to decide what to do. It's about the build up to the accident and what happens, but it's really about the aftermath and the repercussions and the kind of responsibility that we all have to one another, the kinds of moral choices that affect who we are and our futures going forward. I was really interested in that kind of retrospective angle of what happens when you look back on a big mistake, and is there a possibility for forgiveness, or are some things maybe unforgivable?
Oh, yeah. I can definitely, this would be a great book club book because there is so much to discuss.
Yeah.
Well, so here we are now, and I'm sure we're going to talk more about how this book came to be, but I do want to like rewind kind of all the way back because we want to go
Yeah.
through the whole like how you got here. I know a lot of writers are like, oh, I always wanted to be a writer ever since I was a kid. But when do you feel like you got serious about writing and you decided that you were going to start writing books?
That's such a good question to make that distinction, because I was definitely one of those kids who I always wanted to be a writer, and it's always been the only thing really that I've wanted to do. I mean, first grade, when I was 6 years old, every Wednesday we would write stories, and we would get these little like stapled booklets so you could write and draw your own story. And I was a verbose overwriter even then, because I was always asking for more pages to staple in. And with real, like, I always loved to read. And I think realizing that books got made by people, that someone had to write them, and maybe I could write them, and maybe I could tell stories too. But I also feel like for someone who really wanted to write, like as I got into high school and even college, I look back and I'm like, why wasn't I writing more?
Yeah.
Like I meet people now and I'm always so impressed by, I'll talk to people who are like, well, I started writing like this novel when I was 15, or now like fan fiction is so popular. And I think a lot of people get into writing that way. And I was not. And I think that it took me until so I was writing poetry in college. I got really into poetry. And so that was part of it, was like I was interested in writing a novel and I was always interested in fiction, but I fell in love with poetry. And so I was working a lot on that. And I think that informs a lot of my writing. It's definitely in it. And then I did a PhD in English because I was like, I want to write, but I need a job, and teaching is a good job. And it was kind of steered a little bit in that direction. I think especially for poets, it's fairly common to like have the support of a university and get a university job. And I remember I was like halfway through graduate school and was starting to feel like maybe I don't want to do this, because I felt like I was doing all of this writing, but it was academic writing. I was sort of moving away from poetry a little bit. And I had that realization when you ask like when did I get serious about it? I think it was like mid-20s, in the middle of my graduate program. I realized I'm never gonna know how to write a novel. Like I had started different pieces of things, and we can talk about that too. Like I had like a drawer novel that I had written maybe 200 pages of, and then I didn't know how to finish it. And I was like, I'll come back to this when I know how to write a novel. And it was sort of in the middle of this grad program that I realized like I'm not going to learn how to do this unless I just do it, and do it badly was really the thing that, in order to take myself seriously as a writer, I had to give myself permission to write badly rather than not writing at all. And I think graduate school helped with that too, because I was learning how to do different types of writing for that. And I was writing a dissertation, and I didn't know how to write a dissertation either. So it taught me how to like be in the murky middle of a messy project.
It was making me think of a lot of things when you're saying this because I think, especially for people who are kind of academic minded, I would consider myself one too. It's like you're like,
Hmm.
oh, I go to school and I learn how to do this thing, and the teachers
Yeah.
will teach me how, and I'll practice and then I'll do it.
Hmm.
And, I got my MFA, and I always say, like, I do think my MFA helped me write better prose. But I did not learn how to write a novel from my MFA. Like, I had to
Yeah.
go figure that
Yeah.
out myself by doing exactly what you said, writing a couple of bad novels.
Yeah, and especially if you're someone who was good at school, and you don't need to be good at school to be a novelist, but I think maybe a lot of us were. I was very good at school, and in a way, I feel like that was almost a hindrance. Like it's not a humble brag. It's a like I don't think that this helped me, because I was waiting for the like, oh, I do the assignment and I get an A and then I'm a good writer. And that is not how writing a novel works, and that's not how publishing works.
Yeah, definitely. Well, so, okay, so, but then you still did finish your PhD, right?
So I finished the PhD, but I did not go into academia. I did some teaching while I was doing the program, and there was so much that I loved about it. But I still just felt called to do more writing. I, like, all through college and before and during my PhD, I worked as a freelance writer for educational publishing. I have many like hats that I have worn, and one of them was I spent a lot of time writing K through 12 textbooks. And I wrote a lot of math textbooks, which surprises people, surprises myself too. I went back to doing that instead of going into academia, which felt like a funny thing that I like got the PhD, but was back to doing the job that I was doing before I started. But for me, it was just a better fit for controlling my own schedule and being able to then write on top of it. I feel like it's such a complicated question for how do you support yourself while you're writing? Do you have a 9 to 5? Do you freelance? Like I know people who are freelancing who want the steadiness of a 9 to 5, people who have the 9 to 5 who want the steadiness of the freelancing. I wound up doing the freelance route, but it's complicated.
Yeah. So this is so funny. I actually used to write math curriculum as well.
That's so
Yeah.
funny. I like never meet people in that
Yeah, well,
world. Oh, we'll have to like put
I
you
was a
know.
math teacher for a while, and then when I decided I was going to get serious about writing, I was like, okay, I need that, like you said, I'm going to piece together a bunch of different freelance jobs,
Hmm.
and one of them was writing middle school math curriculum, which I did for years.
Yeah.
But yeah, it is such a complicated landscape of like, how do you support yourself with, when you want to have that
Hmm.
creative time and energy to focus on your novel, how do you build a life around that? And I think there's a lot of different answers, and probably none of them are perfect.
No, all of them have problems, but it's part of this overall conversation. I feel like we sort of can't talk about the writing process and the path to publishing without being like, okay, well, how do you eat while you're doing this? And how do you make that time
Hmm.
happen?
Yeah. Well, okay. So then tell me what happened next. You're writing textbooks and you're writing your own stuff, and what happens?
I was thinking about this before this podcast. I was like, I have written so many books, and I've written so many books that didn't necessarily go anywhere, or books that I'm like still seeing, figuring out where they're going. And so before I started graduate school, I started writing a novel number one. That was the one where it was like, I wrote like 200 pages of it. I really liked the idea. I could not make it work. I was like, I'll figure out how to do this later. When I was in graduate school, the first novel that I wrote start to finish, was a young adult science fiction, which is not at all what I do, but I wrote it while I was studying for my oral exams, and I wrote for an hour every day. And I was not allowed to write for less than an hour, and I was not allowed to write for more than an
Ooh,
hour. And I think
interesting.
that's important too. Like I gave myself the cutoff, and I was not allowed to reread what I had written. So I just had to learn, like, that was not a book to like finish and polish. It was a book just to be like, I need to learn how to sit with a long project and not constantly second guess myself. So that was my first finished novel. It was not revised. It will never see the light of day. It was very, very strange, but it was this huge like confidence boost, I think, when I needed it to say, I can do this. And like an hour a day adds up.
Yeah.
So after that, so then I wrote my dissertation. That was everything that I was working on, and I think that also helped because that's like a 300-page document, and I did revise that, in fact. So that was kind of how I learned like I can hold a lot more in my mind than I thought I could, and I learned so much more like how to revise my own work, how to look at my own work. And so when I finished that program, I was like, I'm going to write a novel like for real this time. And that also was a young adult sci-fi. And I worked really hard on it. And that was the first book that I ever queried. And I got very close, like a lot of like R&Rs and you know when you like feel like you're close, but it's not
Hmm.
quite. And at the same time, so my dissertation was on the romance plot in contemporary feminist dystopian and utopian political fiction. So about like these novels that are about social change, but a lot of them end with women getting married and having kids,
Interesting.
which is fine, but is like not super radical. So I sort of share all of that because I got interested through that in, well, what is the romance plot? What is a romance novel? And I started reading some of these romance novels and was like, these are really good. And this is really interesting and a really interesting space, like where so much is happening in feminist literature. And all of a sudden, I had an idea for a romance novel. And it was the first time I'd had an idea for a book that came to mind, like totally start to finish. Like I had this book in mind and I wrote an outline and I wrote the book. And then I revised and revised and revised, but it was a totally different writing experience than anything I'd done before. And that was the book that I got my first agent with. There were all of these other complicated things. My agent was interested in, I had like rewritten the young adult science fiction as a middle grade science fiction. My agent was interested. I did a round of revisions. After the round of revisions, she was no longer
Oh no.
interested. I cried my guts out. But I did have the romance novel. And so that was what we went forward with. And so that's how I got into writing romance novels. I published under a pen name because I wanted to keep, like, I had academic publications and the textbook stuff, and I wanted to keep all of that separate. And I wound up publishing 10 romance novels with an independent press, and all of that was going really well. But at the same time, I was still feeling that call of there was that 200 pages of that other book
Hmm.
that I had started, and there was like so many other things that I wanted to work on too. I think you can probably tell, like, I read very widely. I'm interested in a lot of different genres and different things, and I kept sort of feeling this pull to kind of darker fiction and more literary
Hmm.
fiction. And so I went back kind of in the middle of working on, I had a few different four book contracts. And in the middle of those contracts, I was like, I just want to see if I can finish that other novel that I had started right out of college. Like, I'm not going to put on the pressure of like, do I need to get an agent for it? Am I going to publish it? I was like, I just want to see if I could finish it. And I still really loved the project. And I did. And I wound up getting so involved in that book. Like, I got another agent for
Oh
that
wow.
book.
Okay.
And that was when I was like, this is a game changer.
Can we like at some point I wanna
Yeah.
unpack all the
I
10 romance novels.
know. I just like threw that out there. And then I wrote 10
Yeah. Well,
novels. It was fine.
can we pause and go back to that for a minute? Well, do you mind telling us what your pen name is for those novels?
Yeah, it's Rebecca Brooks. So everyone can find those on they're all on ebooks, and so you should all read those books. They're very steamy.
I guess I'm wondering two things. One is it seems like the first one kind of came to you fully formed. Were you then writing like in the same world or with some of the same characters, or were they all standalones?
So the first two that I did were standalones. The first one is about a woman who leaves her PhD program. Where did I ever come up with that idea? In New York City, and goes and runs a campground upstate and is a painter and falls in love with a chef, and is like totally me finishing grad school, imagining a different life. And then the second one is about a woman who's an American woman who's traveling in Brazil and meets an Australian guy. And then I had a four-book series called The Men of Gold Mountain, which are all set in this like made-up town of Gold Mountain in the Pacific Northwest. And so those are all, it's like a friend group, and each friend gets their book. So they stand alone, but they're also interconnected. And then I did another four-book interconnected series like that called Accidental Love, that's all wrong bed books. So the first bed is wrong bed, right roommate. It's wrong bed, right man. There's a wrong bed, right brother. And those are kind of more, they're set in New York City, and they're a little bit more like fun and flirty in that way.
Okay.
So it was a little bit of everything, like learning how to do a series, but also how to work as a standalone as well.
How many years was it that you were writing all of these romance novels?
It was like 2014 to 2020.
So you were essentially having like more than one book come out a year sometimes.
Yeah. Yeah, it was a fast turnaround. And at a certain point, I like the publishing process is a little bit slower, but like I was having deadlines to get those books in every like 3 to 4 months. I had a new book due. And they're shorter. Like the first two standalones are a little bit longer, they're 90,000 words. And then the series books were more like 60,000. So that did help a little, but like writing is writing and it all just takes a long time.
Yeah, yeah, that's incredible. I mean, I'm guessing you were working with this indie publisher and they were kind of encouraging you to have that scheduled.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah. They're published with Entangled. Yeah, that was definitely like the schedule that they had set. I feel like it's changed a lot, even in the last 5 years. I think the romance landscape has changed. I mean, Entangled put out Fourth Wing, and I think that has changed the romance landscape a lot. And when I was doing this, it was really not like there weren't romance bookstores in the same way that there are at the moment, and there wasn't as much of a print culture around romance. So it's been really interesting. I feel like my experience in the romance world is already kind of
yeah,
outdated.
I mean, romance is very big right now.
It's always been such a big genre. I feel like I was a little bit late to the explosion of ebooks and then a little bit early for the like huge popularity in kind of romance becoming more mainstream.
Mm.
Like romance readers have always been there, but it's found an even bigger readership. And I was like, oh, I timed it like poorly on both
Oh,
ends. But But I think part of like the moral of the story should always be like you can't time the market
yeah.
anyway, so you just keep writing.
Yeah, well, okay, so wow. So you were writing all of these romance novels at a fairly quick pace, but then you had this other novel calling to you from the drawer. You went back to it.
Yeah.
And so I'm guessing the agent you had for the romance novels was like not the right agent for this other book.
Yeah. And it is just like finding the right person, the person who's going to be really excited and an advocate for your work and the person who like really has the right connections and kind of insider knowledge to be like, I know who we should send this to. I know who I should talk to about it. So it was hard being like, I have an agent, but I'm also querying again. But I think that's actually not as weird or unusual as it may seem. You have to like have a conversation with your existing agent about like, I want to work on this other thing. Can I do both? And I think agencies have some different policies about whether you can split representation, but it's definitely not a big deal to a lot of people. And when I did sign then with now I've now had two different literary agents. Spoiler alert where this is going. We've just put something into the contract to kind of delineate on both sides, like who represents what of my work.
Okay. So yeah, so then you got this agent for the other novel.
Hmm.
Yeah, take me through what happened next.
So I worked on that novel. I was really excited. I was like, it's finally happening. I've been working on this book for so long. And drum roll, it didn't sell. We got a bunch of R&Rs. Everyone wanted it to be shorter. So a lot of people really liked it. It definitely got very close, but it was a long book and it needed to be tightened up. Similar to Greenwich, I would say a literary, like propulsive page turner. There's a body that washes up in chapter one. But I think for that, like it needed to be tighter and it needed to be more
Hmm.
propulsive. So I worked on revisions. This is where I start getting into like, oh, should I share this stuff? Is this supposed to be public? But I feel like one of the problems in publishing is how opaque it is and people don't talk about these things. And I do feel like with now having Greenwich out, like there's a privilege and a responsibility to kind of share now that I'm on the other side. That agent never read the revisions and never sent them out and did not work on that novel with me anymore. And I didn't know that happens. And I kept feeling like I did something wrong. What did I do? And only now, when I talk to more people about it, do I realize I'm not the only one that's happened to. And if your agent is doing that to you, leave your agent. There will be life afterwards. So that's where I feel like I wish that I had known, and I wish that I hadn't hung on for so long.
Hmm.
But this is what happened. And at the time, then there were sort of all of these excuses about like, oh, I'm going to read it, I'm going to read it. And in the meanwhile, I was like, I guess I'd better write another novel. And that's the thing. It's like if you write a book, if your book doesn't sell, you write another novel. If your book does sell, you write another novel. So kind of no
Yeah.
matter what, like it's time to write another novel. And so this was now like March of 2020, COVID hit, and I was like, I'm home, gonna write, like no longer just waiting around on this other book. I'm gonna start a new one. And so I spent that year writing another novel. And when my agent promised to read that novel, but also months went by and never did, that was when I realized this is just holding me back and I can't keep doing this. So then I started querying that second novel.
Hmm.
And I did get an agent. That agent is wonderful. I'm still with her. She's the best. It's been a total game changer to realize this is what it's like to work with a really great agent. However, that novel also didn't sell.
Oh boy.
Um, I know it was like this long road. I've got a long road. And I think for that, like, I mean, market timing matters. Like it was like 2021. It's a pretty dark book. It's also a literary propulsive page turner, but it's pretty dark. And I think it just was like not hitting that sweet spot. But I had at that point, I had started writing Greenwich. And I had a conversation with my agent where we were like, okay, what should we do? Like people love this book and they love my writing, but they're just not like clicking in the final way that we need. We could go out to more publishers with it because we had not certainly not exhausted everyone. But because I was working on Greenwich, my agent was like, this sounds really promising. And we know that there are editors out there who would love to read something else by me. So we kind of hit pause on submissions for that second book, and I finished Greenwich in order to send that out. And for whatever reason that I do not know, like that's the one that landed. When I look back, it's like there were so many low moments, but I'm glad that I just kept writing because then I kept having something else to send out. I think like I wouldn't have been able to get a new agent if I didn't have a new book to query. And then I wouldn't have had Greenwich to go out with if I hadn't been like, well, I'm working on something else. Like, let's talk about it. So I think that's where I also kept coming back to like, well, no matter what happens, like you write another book and then you see where that goes. And now at this point, I'm hopeful that like maybe something with those other books that I've continued to work on. It's like you don't know what things are gonna do later on. I think I thought it would be a situation where I'd be like, I just need to write a book that's like good enough and then it will get published. And I feel like with Greenwich, like I mean, I love this book, but I don't think it's better than the other book that didn't get published. I think it just like hit the right editor at the right time in the right way who was willing to take a risk on a book this dark and this
Hmm.
complicated.
Yeah. Yeah. So I have so many things to say here because so
And I'm like, that's such a long story.
well, I've had two novels die on submission and what's
So
so
you
I
know what
know
it's
what it's like.
like.
And one of the things that I'm maybe going to ask you, but I almost feel like you've already answered it is like how do you deal with the kind of emotional roller coaster? But I think I've had the similar experience where like I'm on submission with something, it's not looking great, but I'm already working on something else that I'm now excited about.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm like, it helps ease the blow because I'm like, I've already moved on to this other thing and I'm super excited about this thing.
Right.
So yeah, it'll suck if the thing doesn't sell, but I've got this new one coming down the pike. And I do think that that
Mm-hmm.
helps soften the blow. And I don't know, maybe it's that like delusional, like, well, the other ones didn't sell, but this is the one, you know?
But I think that's just like it's like we have to be a little bit delusional to do this at all. Like you have to believe in your work and you have to believe in your work more than anyone else is going to. Like even when a book does sell, like you still no one else is ever going to love your work the way that you do and like fight for it the way that you will. And so I think like we all have to be like a little bit delusional to do this. But I also think it is really important like you're saying like the one book is not the be all end all of your entire life. And there has to be some of that separation where you say, like, I did the thing, I did it to the best of my ability. Like, the book feels complete. And now, like, we see what happens with it. but it's like it's not your whole life, it's not your whole identity, it's not the only thing that you have going for you. And so there's a new project. It's such a weird shift from like writing a book and publishing a book are two completely different things that are happening. And I think, and even when the book is published, there also has to be that sense of separation that's like this is a little out of my hands and now I'm working on something
Right.
else, like kind of no matter what, because you'll also lose your mind a little bit. When Greenwich went on submission, I was like, I told my agent, I was like, I don't want to hear anything. Like, I don't need passes in my inbox. I don't need to know that it went to acquisitions but didn't get through. I don't need to know how much someone loves it but doesn't know how to sell it. Like, I'm just like, don't tell me anything unless it's actionable feedback that I can do something with. And the rest of the time, I'm just writing a new book.
That's probably very emotionally healthy to do that. I'm too curious. I always want to know like what the feedback is. But then you're right, it is kind of maddening because you'll get this like, oh, I loved it so much and it was this and you're
Yeah.
like, but then why? Why did you say no?
And I was like, it doesn't help. Like I was like, I am just hurting my own feelings. And like because I felt like so much of it was not useful feedback
Hmm.
that I would do something with to help my writing. And so most of it was like, wow, you loved this so much and you've never read anything like it, but you're still not going to publish it. Like, I don't know that I needed to like know that on my
Yeah.
Tuesday.
Yeah. So, okay. So a few other things I want to say, like, I'm really glad you found a new agent who is a supportive agent because I feel like that
Yay.
also really, really
Yeah.
helps. And then yeah, and then you have these other novels that like hopefully something could happen to them someday. I'm just thinking about, my two novels who that died on submission. They're
Hmm.
both YA. And I've honestly kind of just forgotten about them at this point. I'm like, I either,
Yeah.
but my agent was like, "Oh, I had a dream the other night that we aged, one of them up to new adult and I could send it out to all new editors." And I was like, "Oh my gosh, she's like so
Oh,
supportive that she's
yeah.
dreaming about my manuscript." Of course, it behooves her to sell them as well. But so yeah, so we're actually thinking about doing that with both of
Yeah.
them potentially.
It's
So to me, I
exciting.
was like, "Oh, they're dead. They're never going to see the light of day." But it's like, well, you never know. Like,
Yeah. And you want that advocate of someone who's like realizing, I think when you're querying and when you're on submission, it feels like the gatekeepers are not the enemy, that's too strong a word, but like as though they're not on the writer's side. But I think that's not true. And I think like they are looking for great work that they can fall in love with. And I think when they do, and ideally when they're working with an author, like they're thinking about our books
yeah.
too. And that's when they're like, oh, if your agent is not thinking about your book in this way, like you need a different agent. You need the agent who is dreaming about your
Yes,
book.
yes, exactly.
Yes.
Well, okay, so you were writing Greenwich kind of as you were on submission with this other book.
Hmm.
How long, and I'm saying this because I'm reading it right now and I am completely astonished by your writing. Your writing is incredible. How long did it take you to write the manuscript?
I want to say 3 years. It was so I was like, I mean, I had the idea so many years ago. Like, I feel like the ideas just like spend a lot of time, like years in the back of my mind before it's like, oh, I've taken this idea and this idea and this idea, and now I think all of those ideas are actually the same book. So I started outlining and drafting in like the late 2020, but that was based on probably a few years of like this idea percolating. And then we went on submission in spring 2023. Yeah, it sold fall 2023. And then I did probably 6 months of like very intensive
Hmm.
edits. When I say that, it doesn't actually sound that long to me to be like, oh, I wrote it from 2020 to 2023. Like for the, for a novel, I feel like it could be a lot longer. It felt
Yeah.
really long when I was in it
Well,
for
and especially
sure.
a literary novel that is really, like I said, it's so thematically rich. The prose is so
Mhm.
gorgeous. But this is all okay. So this is good for me to hear for a couple of reasons, and probably good for our listeners. One is that so you were even with Greenwich still on sub for a while. It didn't
Yeah.
sell right away. So that's kind of it's nice for me to hear, I guess.
Yeah. Well, and I feel like there's all this, like, people are always talking about this process, right? There's like tons of stuff on the internet, there's lots of podcasts, everyone has a different experience. But I feel like there is this narrative that goes out that's like, oh, if it's not an immediate sale, it's not going to happen. And I mean, I am just one story, and I don't know if like maybe I'm the anomaly, but I just felt like that's not true
Mhm.
because there's different rounds of submissions. Like the whole process is so slow too. And so like there were people where it was sitting on their desk for like 7, 8 months, who weren't reading it like until I got an offer. And then all of a sudden everything picked up and like there was all of this interest, but I don't know. It's a complicated process, and we never know what's going on other people's desks. Also, like the middle of the summer in there.
Mhm.
But yeah, I mean, it was not quick, and that's part of why, like, I drafted almost a whole other book in that time because I was just like on to the next.
Yeah. Did you have multiple offers for Greenwich or just the one?
We ultimately had just the one, but it was nice to like have a bunch of people reading at the same
Yeah,
time, you
definitely.
know.
Well, and I think the other thing that I'm feeling like is is helpful for me is I do feel like I have this thought of like I'm always kind of one step ahead of myself where I'm like, okay, if this one doesn't
Hmm.
sell, I need to have another one ready to go.
Right.
But like, like you said, I mean, you still took 3 years to write Greenwich.
Yeah.
Like you said, publishing is so slow, and I think we often will put this like go, go, go pressure on ourselves, and you just have to take the time it
Yeah.
takes.
Yes, yes. And that was it was like I want to go out with another book, but I'm not going to rush it. And I also think it was like those editors who had read my previous novels and wanted to see something else from me. It's not like they wanted to see something else from me next week.
Right.
Like they probably would not have been excited about that because they'd be like, I just read a different book from her. Like, send me like the best work, not just everything that you have. The other thing that I just thought of that I was going to say too is in addition to saying like there can be such a like flurry of narratives that like people talk about online or whatever where it feels like, oh, I didn't get a deal in the first month so my book is dead. It's also like, oh, I only got one offer so like my book is going to be dead. And like that is not true either. Like you don't in fact need more than one. Like you need the editor who's really, really excited about it. And that I feel like has made all of the difference. And also I've realized from talking to people, all of these things you hear about in publishers marketplace about like this sold at auction, this sold in a preempt, like the number of people that I have talked to behind the scenes where like the preempt was their only offer. Like the preempt is supposed to be a bigger offer that takes things off the table. But I definitely know people who have said no one else made an offer and then they got this last minute thing. And then I read their publisher's marketplace that says a preempt, and I'm like, something is not lining up
Hmm.
here. So all of that is just to say also, like, if you're feeling all of this pressure about around like everyone else is having these different experiences, like you do not know what's really going on.
Yeah.
Like publishing is about crafting a narrative
Yes.
and creating an image for a book. And I think that's really important to remember too.
Yes, I think that that is so true that like the people who are making these books are also kind of creating the story around the
Right,
publishing of the
right.
books. Yeah. And it's not always 100% true to life. There's a little bit of
Yes,
fiction in there.
yes.
So, but
Yeah.
yeah, I was going to say too about your like, editors want to see something else from you, but not necessarily right away. So I was at a conference recently and somebody was telling me, oh, like I pitched to an agent and she wants to see my novel, but it's not quite ready yet. And what do I do? And I was like, if she wants to see your novel, that offer stands. Like it's not like she needs you to
Yeah.
send it to her ASAP. She's got a lot of other stuff to read.
Yes.
But like
Yes.
if she said she wants to see it, then that could mean in 6 months, that could mean a year from now. Like I am saying this for my listeners, I'm saying this for myself, like you don't have to rush. There's a
Yes.
feeling like you do, but you don't really have to.
Yes, it's my agent will often say no one's on the operating table, and I find that a very helpful thing to remember too. Like, yes, this is very important to me, but this is not life or death. And it is like that offer does not expire, and people want to see your best work whenever it's ready. And it's also like publishing time it's a different time warp. Like for someone who's like if an editor or an agent is interested and they have to wait 6 months, like that does not feel like a long time to them, I
Right.
don't think.
Yeah.
Like you do not want to send the book out before it's really done.
Yes. Yeah, I agree. Okay, so one thing I wanted to just ask about, because I was thinking about it when I knew I was going to be talking to you, and I was like, it's kind of funny that you have published 10 other novels, and yet we're calling Greenwich your debut novel,
This is the debut.
right?
Yeah.
And, it was making me think about like, oh, if you were to like next publish a YA novel, you could call that your YA debut. There's like this thing about the shiny
Yeah.
debut label. And I don't know if you have any thoughts about that or like, so you may not know, but my question was like, well, so then if you wrote like a sci-fi novel, could that be your sci-fi debut? Like, how far can we push it?
That's an interesting question. I don't know. It is funny, when I was telling people like my debut novel, and people who know me were like, "This is not your first book. What are you talking about?" But I do feel like this experience has been so different. I think like putting out like the digital first romance novel under a pen name 10 plus years ago, like it does feel like, oh, I don't actually have any experience with any of this. I'm doing something totally new. And I think being like in a different genre, using my own name, I think being with a big five press has been a really different experience. It has felt like all of these things, where I've been like, what happens next? It has been a really different experience. And so in that respect, I was like this does feel like a debut. This does feel like a new stepping forth. I think as far as like doing different genres probably becomes like all of this again is a perception question around, like have you published enough that your name carries the kind of cachet that your other readers will follow you into this new space? In
Mm,
which case, it's like it's not a new thing because it's still the familiar you. I would imagine that there's a lot of like thought that goes into that. And there are some authors who will do like genre crossover. I don't know. I'm thinking of like Lily King because she has a new book that
yeah.
just came out, was like writing contemporaries and then wrote Euphoria, which is historical, but it's not like this is her like historical debut.
Yeah, I guess, I mean, I did just read John Green's Everything is Tuberculosis, and I don't
Mm-hmm.
think, I mean, he
Mm-hmm.
writes YA and then he writes
Right.
nonfiction, and so I don't think they're like his nonfiction debut. So, yeah.
Right. Right. It's a funny question with all of this. And I had felt a little like going into it, I think I imagined that I would keep the romance stuff much quieter. Like I would
Mm,
not be on a podcast being like, so in my romance novels as Rebecca Brooks. But then I was sort of like, this is part of my publishing experience, and it feels disingenuous to act like I hadn't written any books
yeah.
before this. And then I was like, I don't know, it's not a secret. It's like this is not a romance novel, and I felt like I needed to be very clear with my romance readership. Like, do not read this if you're looking for a romance novel. Like, it's going to be a different kind of book. But at the same time, I was also like, there's a lot of things about romance that like informed how I approached Greenwich. It's not like I used to feel like I was doing so many different things and they were all totally scattered. And I think with publishing Greenwich, I also kind of saw how it's all come together and sort of informed the way that I approach writing and the way that I approach storytelling and kind of what I'm working on now.
What was the launch of Greenwich like? Did you do anything special? How did you feel about it?
I mean, launching that book was like the best night of my life. I did, so I live in New York and I had a New York launch at a bookstore here, P&T Knitwear. And like tons of people came. I think especially because like this had been such a long time coming that, I really felt like my community showed up for me. Like I had friends who flew in from out of state, from Canada. It was like gonna get all verklempt just thinking about it. It was like I felt really, really supported and loved. Really glad that I planned some events in order to get to like really celebrate the book. But I also felt like I do not need to do like a 10 city book tour because I don't know people in 10 cities because I'm a writer, which means that I like stay home in my pajamas and write and I don't like have those kinds of connections. So
Yeah.
I tried to kind of balance out like I want to do something, but I don't need to like totally lose my mind.
Yeah. But I do, like you said, it's really important to celebrate this. I mean,
Yeah,
it's a huge deal, and I think,
yeah,
I mean, hopefully one of the things this podcast will do is like show people like how long the journey is, how many like close calls. And so when you really get there, it is a huge, huge accomplishment.
Yes,
So,
yes. There was sort of a joke like in some of the romance circles that I was in when I was like going to conferences and meeting other people, and I now I can't remember like who actually said this. There was sort of a group of us that joked about we should do a panel or something on like the times I thought my career was over, because I feel like everyone has those moments where you just think it's done. Whether it's like it's never going to happen and I'm never going to get this book published, or like I do have a career but now it's totally tanked. And I just think remembering, like keeping in mind that everybody feels that way and it's totally normal and it's not over is important for like continuing to keep going when you're trying to get published, and then continuing to keep going once you are published and you're like, oh, that road to publishing did not end. Like there is more road to continue
right,
down.
more hills to to go up
Yes,
and down.
yeah.
Or can you think of anything that's maybe surprised you along this journey, either good or bad or one of each?
Because I've had a lot of ups and downs as we've gone over, like I felt like in the year leading up to publishing Greenwich in particular, like I was constantly waiting for the other shoe to drop.
Mm,
Like I just felt it was sort of paralyzing, always expecting something bad to happen, because I'd had these instances of like losing an agent or like thinking that something was going to happen and then it didn't, or just assuming something bad is going to happen. And the thing that I guess surprised me was that so many good things
mm.
happened. So, and like I'm hearing myself and I'm like, that's sort of ridiculous. But it really was like I did not kind of have space in my world at that time for recognizing like this is going to be a great experience.
Yeah.
And I don't all like, yes, I'm sure that there will be plenty of downs ahead. I'm not like, oh, like Greenwich came out and now like I'm just on easy street for the rest of my life. Like I'm still working on another book and it's really, really hard. But at the same time, like I was surprised by the joy. And I've been also trying to like make more space for that and remember, like when I'm talking to people about writing too, like about how much I love writing and that's why we're doing this, because we love writing.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. Yeah, I can imagine too that like, you sign this book deal, but then it's so long before the book comes out.
yeah, it's
It
so
it
weird.
is like I can imagine like a long time for you to start being like, well, is everything okay? Well, I haven't heard from my editor in a while.
Yes.
Did they like the revisions? Are they gonna cancel my book? Like, there's
Yes, all of this, like, is this really happening? Is this really, really happening? And I like certainly asking my agent, like, okay, so I've signed the contract, like, can they cancel it? Like, is this really happening?
yeah, yeah.
Because it is a long time. It's
I
weird.
know that's why so many people look forward to the moment when they can like see their publisher's marketplace announcement and post it because it's almost like, okay, it's real now. Like now I feel like it's real.
Yeah, like, but it is with all of this. I mean, it's like now, like, I have a book and I can hold it, and I'm still like, I can't believe it's
Yeah,
real.
there it is right behind
I'm
you
like,
and it's
yeah,
gorgeous.
still waiting for that to sink in. It does help when you get the first advance payment. I
Mm.
was like, okay, that feels pretty real. Like that feels like something.
And okay, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think I saw in the acknowledgments that you also have a film agent. So
I
is
do.
that like, are they trying to work on selling Greenwich?
I think so. I mean, my understanding of that world is like it seems to like being struck by lightning to have anything happen. But it's yeah, I do. I'm really lucky. I have a film TV agent. And so my understanding is that yeah, they're like shopping it around and trying to drum up some interest. I
Yeah.
hear from a lot of people who are like, this should be a movie, like this should be like a limited series HBO special. And I'm like,
Yeah,
yes, I
great.
totally agree. Like from your lips to the producers and like the people who have money. But I don't know. It's like a different relationship where like with my literary agent, we check in a lot. I can just like shoot her a text message. I like am very on top of like what's happening. And with the TV film agent, it's a little bit more like, I don't know, I'll hear from them like when I hear from them.
Yeah,
So
yeah. Yeah, that's one of those things I think, going back to what you said about like waiting for the other shoe to drop. I feel like in this industry, we're so conditioned to like temper our excitement to be like,
yeah.
okay, well, I have an agent, but don't get too excited because, oh, like, okay, I have a film and TV agent, but I can't, like, don't get too excited because nothing might ever happen from that. And so
Yeah.
then it's like when something actually does happen, you're like, am I allowed to be excited now?
Yeah,
You
yeah.
know?
Like I don't really like remember especially like, and I had a few offers from different film and TV agents, and it was like very exciting, but also so stressful. It's like I'm like taking meetings with the film people, like what even is going on? And that was such a weird moment too, of like, I think I should be excited about this, but mostly I just want to vomit. It was like my body does not know the difference between like good news and being chased by a saber-toothed tiger. Like it's all just like, no, too stressful. I can't handle it.
Yeah, yeah. Oh my gosh.
So I'm working on that.
I was interviewing somebody else recently that was like, here's my tip. All writers need a therapist. And I'm like, you
Yes,
know,
yes, yep. Oh, I definitely have talked about this in therapy and find it incredibly helpful. And I do think it is like that's been a really big thing. And part of it was then I had to spend therapy talking about like I feel really ridiculous talking about like this great thing that's happening to me, especially when there are so many very bad things happening in the world.
mm,
But it was also like this is a thing that I am going through, and it is like valid for me to need to talk about and process these emotions and sort of internalize. Like, I think, especially for those of us who have been working on this for a long time, like, it's a big life shift, and it has felt like kind of starting a new job in midlife,
mm,
having like a career shift in a way, like learning something totally new in learning publishing.
yeah.
So I do definitely recommend like, yay, therapy.
Well, speaking of tips, I do end every episode with a tip for our listeners. So do you have a pet tip that you want to give to us?
In addition to get a therapist, God, there's so many things that come to mind. But I think the biggest one for me, like this is the long road to publishing, and we've been kind of talking about all of that with the ups and downs. And I think it's like stay on the road. Like
Mm,
the only way to guarantee that you will get published or that like something will happen, whatever it is that you want, like that you finish the book, that the book gets published, that something happens, like you have to keep doing it. And you can't like take yourself out of the running too soon. And so that's what I think it's like just stay in it. Stay on the road no matter how long or how very twisty it is.
yes, love it. Great advice. The Long Road to Publishing is produced and edited by me, Eva Langston, and the intro and outro music comes from the artist Soundroll on Upbeat. You can find me online on Instagram, Blue Sky, and Substack with the handle Eva Langston. Even better, find my newsletter for writers at evalangston.substack.com. And feel free to send me an email. The podcast address is longroad.pub@gmail.com. Remember to rate, review, and subscribe to the show, and I'll be back soon with more stories about the long and winding path to publishing and more tips for the road.